This is JCT TV, Bible study for the 21st century. I know you've been enjoying the interviews with Pastor R.D. Glenn. If you've not seen the last couple of programs, you can always log on to jimcantelontoday.com or to BibleDiscoveryTV.com and watch JCT and see those former programs. I hope you will if you haven't yet. He's a tremendous young pastor with a very gripping life story, especially, at this Christmas season. So that's upcoming. And then, of course, my Bible teaching segment. So hang in there with us, friends.
Jim Cantelon would like to send you a copy of his children's book, The Boy Who Sang for the Angels. It's a touching story with beautiful illustrations. He'll send it to everyone who asks for it and hopes that you'll include a special Christmas donation to JCT's outreach to orphans and widows through WOW. Jim and his dedicated staff wish you a blessed Christmas.
I know you've been enjoying my interviews with R.D. Glenn. And again, if you have not seen them on the Vision release in Canada, on the National Religious Broadcasters release in the USA, or on the internet, you can go to the internet, jimcantelontoday.com, or you can go to BibleDiscoveryTV.com/programs. And you can see the 2 interviews I've done with R.D. Glenn in the past few weeks. Absolutely fascinating pastor with a huge life story. But let's pick it up at this Christmas season, R.D. Christmas is just around the corner. Mm-hmm. You're pastoring a vital church in Burlington. You've been pastoring now for 15 years. What do you do at Christmas with your people? What makes Christmas Christmas? What makes Christmas Christmas at St. George's?
Oh boy, that's a great question, Jim. Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is a lot of Christians begin the Christmas story with the baby in the manger, right? And in fact, the Christmas story doesn't make any sense. It just becomes woolly, wet, saccharine. Yeah. The truth of the Christmas message is, and this is what we drive home at St. George's, is that it begins with a God who is at enmity with his people, with a human race that has overtly rebelled and openly lived against the God and King of the universe. Yeah. And then the story unfolds from there, that this king and God is not like other kings. Human kings are insecure. When they see rebels, they crush them and they kill them. But that this good God and King did the opposite. Instead of killing them, he came and died for them to pay the price for them. And so when you look at the baby in the manger on December 25th, this is not just some lovely, quaint little story. This is God tearing open the curtain of time and space and inserting himself in human flesh on a rescue mission to reconcile rebels and have them seated at his table as adopted children. When you come to Christmas, you're playing for all the marbles.
Yeah. Christmas evokes a lot of emotion for most of us. I have memories of Christmas when I was just a little guy. My dad was a pastor and we lived below the poverty line, and we had very little, but we had a lot of love. And he had little congregations. But I remember being in awe of this massive Christmas tree. You know, I'd look up at this huge thing, which now I know is only 7 feet tall, but at that point I was 2 feet tall.
Yeah.
You know, and there was candy, and there was gifts, and there was this beautiful music, and there was usually some kind of a Christmas Sunday school play.
Yeah.
You know, all of these warm memories. And then Christmas morning, especially if it was snow on the ground, just had a special magic all to itself. And there are those who want to debunk these things, who want to rob Christmas of much of its magic. And I use that word,
of course.
In its purest sense. Do you play to these emotions as a pastor?
Well, what we do is we use them as opportunities. Yeah. So we are located in the middle of suburban Burlington, and there's just a boatload of very typical suburbanites, families with 2.5 kids and a cockapoo and a minivan. Yeah. And so what we do is we put up a 70-foot tall Christmas tree outside our church, and we light it. And one evening we invite the entire community out. We have hot chocolate and cookies, and hymns and Christmas carols are sung, and we invite the entire community out. And we light the Christmas tree, and we get 1,000 people or so out, and it's a pretty significant event. But we never miss that opportunity to tell them what we're actually doing. I think this is when Christian ministry is at its best, when it holds these two worlds together. Yeah. If you are overly in the world, then you have no gospel to preach, and you're actually just a social club. But if you only ever stay deeply entrenched in deep theology, and you don't keep your other foot in what's going on in people's lives, then you have nothing to say. Yeah. So we do those things. Yeah, but intentionally.
Yeah, right.
Intentionally.
So in one of my pastorates in years past, we had a singing Christmas tree, and we had 100 people on that pickin' tree, right? And we'd get 35,000 people out over 13 shows, and it was just with a live orchestra, and it was just all Christmas, and lots of tradition, lots of secular Christmas music as well.
Yeah, for sure. Frosty the Snowman.
Yes, as well as Hark the Herald Angels Sing. And I would present about a 3-minute little summary of why we were doing what we were doing. And I was astonished at the numbers of people who almost seamlessly just came to faith through that little experience, Because exactly as you say, we had a foot in both worlds.
That's right.
And to find the balance, of course, is critical, but balance has to be achieved.
For sure. And that's the story of the incarnation.
Yeah.
I mean, God doesn't remain in the clouds or in the ether, right? He incarnates in human form. He comes down to the lowest of the low, and he shows us who he is in the person of Jesus Christ, right? So that's exactly what you have in Christmas.
You mentioned lowest of the low. There was nobody lower much in society in Jesus' day than shepherds. I mean, they were the blue collars and tough work, 24/7, probably uneducated. And God chooses to open the heavens to these shepherds and announce the birth of the baby. It's a great story.
Can I tell you a quick story? Yeah. So a friend of mine, he's a pastor, and he's a young guy. He's younger than I am. He just married a Russian woman. And so for their honeymoon, they went to Russia. Her uncle was driving them around in a car, and this uncle who only speaks Russian says to my buddy, "What do you do for a living?" in Russian to the translator. And he says, "I'm a pastor." And this guy says to him, "Oh, I got a question for you. It's the same question that I ask all pastors." He said, "And if anyone could ever answer it, I'm going to become a Christian." My buddy's like, "Oh, wow, what's the question?" And the guy says to him, Jesus is the centerpiece of Christian faith, but you guys are confused because even though he's at the center of your faith, you guys can't agree when his birthday is. The Orthodox celebrate it one day, the Eastern on Monday. Why is that? And my friend looks at this guy. He immediately realizes this guy is like blue collar, champion of the proletariat. He's like the underdog. Yeah. And he says, well, actually, that's the beauty of the Christian message. That's the beauty of Christmas. Back in Jesus' day, the only people who got birth certificates were the powerful, the rich, and the elite. But when our Savior incarnate, when the God of the universe took human flesh, he came as the lowest of the low.
Yeah. No birth certificate.
No birth certificate. So the fact that we don't know his birthday is actually the crowning jewel of Christmas.
Terrific answer.
Oh, you should bring him on your show.
Had he forethought this?
No, I don't
just came to him at the moment.
I don't think so. Yeah.
I wonder what impact this had on this
Yeah, I
fellow.
don't know. He never told me.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's a great response.
Yeah.
It's an amazing story, the Christmas story. It's full of tragedy too. I mean, Herod didn't take lightly to the news of this birth because he'd been told that he was going to be the king of the Jews, and tried to kill him. And the only way he could get to him was by killing every baby of the similar age in that area. Great sorrow. And then having to escape to Egypt, his parents taking him to Egypt, facing adversity almost from day one.
Yeah.
But the thing that touches me the most about the Christmas story is when Joseph and Mary brought him into the temple on the seventh day. And the old Simeon, who'd been waiting for the consolation of Israel, and God had promised him he would not die until he saw the consolation of Israel, referring to the Messiah, holds him in his arms and says, "Now let thy servant depart in peace, for mine eyes have seen thy salvation."
Yeah.
It gets me every time. Every Christmas when we were raising our children, I would read the Christmas story. When I get to that point, I'd cry. And the kids, they learn to expect it. Dad's going to weep.
3, 2, 1.
Dad's going to weep. I mean, this is a trigger mechanism.
Yeah.
But who would have thought that this baby would be the consolation of Israel?
Yeah. Well, Jim, it's somewhat of a litmus test, isn't it? Just the whole Simeon account. People in our culture in North America are sometimes culturally Christian. Yeah. You're a Christian because you vote for one political party, or you're a Christian because you, wear khaki pants or whatever, right? Yeah. But how do you know if you've truly come to a living faith in Jesus Christ? How do you know if you've been born again? How do you know if you're saved? I mean, put in all the words, right? And I think in that moment when Simeon looks at Jesus and he's like, well, there it is. He's like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I've seen Jesus. He's my everything.
Yeah.
I think when people look at the Christmas story, that's the test. You look at Jesus and he's like, do you behold him as your greatest treasure? Is he the one that makes everything in your sense, all of the good things, all the hard things, all the suffering, all the malevolence, does it all come together in this person, in this baby, in Jesus? Because that's the crux of saving faith.
The last two interviews, we talked about your journey of bereavement and single parenting, and then remarriage and blending of families. It's been a few years now. You talked about a whole new life beginning, the old passing, the new beginning with the new family. Have you developed yet a new family Christmas tradition?
Developed several of them. Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
No, we got 2 minutes. What do you like to do with your wife and your kids?
Well, our kids are teenagers now, so gone are the days of the 5 a.m. wake up on Christmas morning.
Yeah, thank the Lord.
Yeah, thank the Lord. I think one of the most joyful things for us now is my entire family comes with me to the late night service on Christmas Eve. So when they were little kids, when Matthew was just little and he was all I had, I got to go home and go to bed. Yeah. But there's a richness in those candlelight Christmas Eve services, and that I can share that with my children and with my wife. It's a great delight.
Yeah. Do you have a best Christmas memory?
I think I have an aggregate total of good Christmas memories. Jim, my parents, and I've been blessed. My family of origin is godly and loving and Christian. And, when I think back on my childhood and Christmas, all I have are good memories.
Which speaks well for your upbringing. I have often said, friends, you're listening to R.D. Glenn here, and some of you can resonate not only with his life story, but also with his total joy. Others of you wish you could. I don't know where you're coming from, whether your Christmas pasts have been bitter or whether they have been joyful. One thing I do know is we can sing with full throat, "Joy to the world, the Lord has come." It's all about Jesus. It's time to meet him. I'll be back with our Bible study right after this.
The Bible tells us that true religion is visiting orphans and widows in their distress. The Bible also says that God is a father to the fatherless and a defender of widows. Heaven's core values for mankind begin with God's heart for the least of these. When you support WOW, You're in the sweet spot of God's heart for the poor. Yes, we're only a small player in this great drama, but at least we're on the field. Please give generously.
So friends, we're in Mark, and I'm taking my time. I always do. Mark chapter 2. We've just covered the story of Jesus healing a paralytic in Peter's house. And he's now just walked a few paces down to the side of the sea, as it's called, but it's a lake, Kinneret in Hebrew, Sea of Galilee. It's been called a number of things. At one point it was called Lake Tiberias. It had another name, which escapes me right now, but we know it as the Sea of Galilee. So he walks down there, and it's a very rocky beach. I actually did a wedding there one time on that stony beach. And to my amazement, the bride showed up in bare feet. I don't know how she managed to walk on those. You know, it's basically volcanic rock that has been crushed into stone over time, and it's very sharp-edged. Anyway, it's not the kind of beach you go to and, you know, lie down and sun yourself. It's just a stony, rocky, difficult beach. Anyway, he goes there, and in verse 14 of chapter 2, as he passed by, what's that mean? As he was walking down to the beach. And again, it's just it would have been maybe 30, 40 yards max. He saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax office. And he said to him, "Follow me." So he arose and followed him. Now, it happened as he was dining in Levi's house that many tax collectors and sinners also sat together with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many, and they followed him. Now, you know, Mark, Luke is this way too, but Mark, even more so, is quite parsimonious, meaning he's short on words. He doesn't use a lot of descriptive phrases. He doesn't give you a lot of detail. He's basically just almost giving you a summary of events. And what he's just described here in one or two sentences probably would have, you know, taken several minutes to transpire. But he's going down to the beach, and there's Levi, the son of Alphaeus, still at his tax office. And if this happened right after healing the young paralytic, there's a huge crowd swarming around, and it's probably getting close to dark. I'm just surmising that, but if in fact these events are concurrent, that would be the case. Levi is obviously just, you know, wrapping up his day's business. Now, what in the world was he doing there? He was Jewish, and he was hated. Why? Because he was collecting taxes for the occupying power of Rome. Rome were occupying Palestine at that time, and they had the people of Israel under their thumb. Now, the Romans were far more easygoing in their occupancy of foreign countries than many other nations were, but they still had the rules and regulations. And one of them had to do with taxes. And they essentially taxed every male for X number of denarius or denarii once a year. It wasn't a huge amount of money. And so they were required, their tax collectors were required to collect those taxes, but they also were collecting taxes from the various caravans that were going through the trade route, east-west corridor on which Capernaum sat. And so there'd be a lot of activity going on, but Levi, they're called publicans as well as tax collectors, was doing this for the Romans, even though he himself was Jewish. He was taxing his own fellow citizens who were Jewish, and everybody knew the way a tax collector made his money was by surcharge. So, just for example, the Roman authorities would say to Levi, we need, we'll use contemporary terms, we need $100 today from you. Levi would collect not 100, but $165. He'd give the $100 to the Romans and keep 65 for himself. This way, he became a very wealthy man, as was the case for almost all the tax collectors. This is another reason why people hated them, because most people were poor. And here are these turncoats, these Benedict Arnolds who are, turning on their own people, who are collecting taxes and gouging them and have the power to gouge them, because if we don't give them what they're gouging us to give, he can throw me in jail. And so tax collectors were seen as home wreckers. Little wonder they were despised. They were right up there or down there with, drunkards and wife beaters and sex workers. And, they just were the scum of the earth as far as the culture was concerned. Pardon me. So, Jesus goes by Levi sitting at his tax office. And he said to him, "Follow me." So he arose, followed him. Now it happened as he was dining in Levi's house. You see, as I said, Mark doesn't give us a lot of detail. We have to kind of fill in the blanks ourselves. Obviously, some time is passing here, and there's an invitation that happens, and Jesus accepts the invitation, and who knows how long it took for Levi's servants to prepare the meal and all of that stuff. But finally, we got Jesus at Levi's house, this much hated tax collector. And it wasn't just Levi who was there, but Mark tells us many tax collectors and sinners, and that those two terms were synonymous. If you were a tax collector, if you were a tax collector, you were also a sinner. The two went together, all right? Sat together with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many, and they followed him. This was totally, and I mean totally, politically incorrect for Jesus to invite a publican, a tax collector, into his inner circle, number one, and then to go and sit with him at a meal. Even though he was Jewish, Levi was seen as a Gentile because of his working for the Gentile Romans. And they were the unwashed in the Jewish view. They were the unkosher ones, right? They were the unwashed, heathen. They were outside of, the kingdom of heaven for sure. And they were dogs in the view of many. I say unwashed. If you have a meal to this day in an Orthodox Jewish home, there's an actual kind of ceremony that especially the men go through where they're washing their hands before they eat. Well, that's good hygiene for one thing, but it's also a part of their cultural core values. Cleanliness, kosher, absolutely vital to them. Separation of meat and dairy and all of that. Many of my ultra-Orthodox friends have 2 kitchens, 2 dishwashers, 2 refrigerators. One is dairy, one is meat, and they're separate. They don't even mix their silverware. You got a knife and a fork for your dairy meal, knife and a fork for your meat meal. I mean, you can say, what? Well, that's just the way it is, and it's centuries old. It's nothing to be sneezed at. It's nothing to be looked down upon. That's just the reality. And the fact that they're doing this, in their view, is an indicator of their commitment to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So, to sit down with the unwashed, because it was not the custom for Gentiles to go through the same kind of hygienic rituals before a meal as it was for the Jewish. And on top of that, unwashed was a kind of a blanket term for those who were outside of the pale, if you will, those who were beyond God's interest, those who were heading for hell, and the sooner the better, as far as many of the washed people were concerned. The fact that he would sit down at a meal with them was an absolute politically incorrect thing to do. And then, Mark says, many of these unwashed people, many followed him. You have to put yourself in the position of especially the religious leaders, the scribes and Pharisees. The Sadducees were a part of the mix too, but they were mainly focused in Jerusalem. They were the temple authorities. much smaller group than the Pharisees and the scribes. But, from their point of view, they're going along quite fine, thank you very much, have done so for centuries and centuries, have developed a whole oral tradition. They've built their hedge around the law, and that's a term that they used to use to protect people from even getting into territory where they might commit a sin, keep them outside of the law with this hedge they built. And so here comes this hedge breaker, this guy who just will not conform.
JCT TV is the official voice of WOW, working for orphans and widows. Jim Cantelon is the founder of WOW and has been ministering to orphans and widows in distress for 18 years. WOW's focus is home-based care for the dying. The horizon is vast, with thousands of the least of these in Africa and India. WOW depends on your generous support. To do so, simply contact us by phone, mail, or online.
If you like more than you can get from the program, and I understand the frustration because I'm not able to deal with it in depth, ask for Cantelon's Casual Commentary. This is the first volume of 2 that I have written for you on the book of Mark. It's very compact. I've done this deliberately. It's easy to ship out. It's cheap to ship out. It fits in your pocket, your purse. It fits in an envelope so I can send it to you. It can be shoved into your Bible, but it's very compact and very, I think, helpful. So if you want to know more about what I'm talking about, then ask for this. And when you do, just remember your best ministry gift. I'm not saying quid pro quo here. I'm just saying we need your help. And I'll do my best to help you. You do your best to help us. And together with working for orphans and widows, of which we are the spokesman, we can make a difference in the lives of many people around the world. Thanks for watching.